How did you go from Jean Luc-Ponty and Vital Information to Journey?
I started playing in 1963. The music landscape was really different between jazz and rock before the Beatles and after the Beatles. There really wasn't much of a boundary. Before that, there was a lot more access and interest in big band jazz. My direction was follow the opportunities. So I decided to play with Ronnie Montrose because I could keep rocking out. Our tour in the early part of '78 was Van Halen's first tour.
What?
They were the opening act. They had just released Really Got Me. I played in the middle act, and then Journey was the headliner.
You're in your early 20s.
Yeah, 23. That was like kind of an initiation into rock and roll for me. But at the end of that year, I joined a band.
How did that change your life?
Well, it took a long time to start making money. When I started playing in the band, I inherited, 1/6 of $1 million debt to Columbia Records.
Can you walk me through the creative process in writing those drum parts for Don't Stop Believin'?
I was starting to hear counter melodies. The tracks were played live. Steve Perry sang live. And the other thing, there were no click tracks. We just played the music.
Was there times in these songs when they would look back and be like, dude, what are you doing? That's way too much.
Yes.
You're on all the biggest Journey songs. Like that moment of Journey with you and Steve Perry, of course, that's the journey, right?
The music that stands the test of time was during that one period.
And now that you're in Journey and you guys got big singles, like you're famous now, but you still have this like passion for jazz and everything that you want to be playing outside of Journey. How did you feel?
It was a challenge for me. I didn't want to be pigeonholed as like a rock drummer that just played the music of Journey. It was definitely part of who I was during that time, but it wasn't the entirety of it. And I had all these other bands that I was playing in, and that saved me in a way, like emotionally. By 1986, I took Peter Erskine's place in the group called Steps Ahead with Michael Brecker on saxophone, Mike Stern on guitar, Mike Maneri on vibes, and Daryl Jones on bass. Then have toured with a lot of other people, Hiromi. It's been over 40 years that I've had Vital Information.
What happened? Like, how did you end up leaving Journey?
Oh, man. So you had to bring that up, huh?
Go.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Once again, we are blessed with another amazing guest, one of the greatest drummers of all time, Mr. Steve Smith. This was a really special interview for me because I've been listening to Steve since I was a kid. When I first heard Journey and I heard the drums on Don't Stop Believin', it really just made me think about drums in a different way because the approach was so different. Then as I saw Steve all over all the drum magazines, I realized that he was a jazz drummer and he's a jazz fusion drummer. And I've always wanted to understand the trajectory and the timeline of Steve Smith and what he was doing before Journey, how Journey changed him, and then what happened after Journey, because I just saw him always as this amazing educator and amazing jazz drummer. So now I fully understand, and I think you will fully understand too. And it was also just great getting to talk with Steve. He's such an awesome guy, brilliant human being, really has dedicated himself to the craft of drumming and studying it and knowing all about it and being the best that he can absolutely be. And he has achieved that. So for all you Steve Smith fans out there, I hope you get some new information out of this one. I really loved it. Big thank you to our friends at Zildjian. I'm using the Zildjian Alchemy headphones today. They sent them my way. They come in white and black and some other colors. They're really nice. So thank you, Joe, and everybody at Zildjian and Vic Firth. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe or follow wherever you're listening to us. We are all over in the podcast world. We're dropping interviews every single week with the greatest musicians, producers, artists, songwriters, engineers in the game. Check our channel. Look deep. There's all the best drummers in there. We're going strong. And you following and subscribing is a simple way that you can support us that we appreciate, and we will keep it going. So without further ado, here is my conversation with the incredible Steve Smith. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the show. We have another incredible guest for you today. One of the greatest drummers of all time. One of my favorites. Modern Drummer magazine named him top 25 drummers of all time, and the readers voted him #1 all-around drummer 5 years in a row. He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Make a ton of noise for Steve Smith.
Wow, that's quite an introduction, Elmo. Thank you.
You deserve it, Steve. I'm such a big fan, man. I love what you do.
Much appreciated.
When I first became a fan of yours, it was like early 2000s. I was a teenage drummer, and I was like, wow, this guy's amazing. The Journey drummer is amazing. The drums on Don't Stop Believin' are so non-conventional and musical. And then I saw you in all the drum magazines, and I was like, this guy's everywhere. And then I researched you more, and I'm like, he's a jazz drummer in Journey? Like, what is, and then I went deeper into you, and I was like, oh, he is a jazz drummer. And I learned about Vital Information, and I saw you play with Vital Information and all that kind of stuff. So how did you go from Jean Luc-Ponty and Focus and Vital Information to Journey?
Okay. The best way to explain it is, as a young drummer, I definitely saw myself primarily as a jazz drummer, because coming up as a teenager and through high school, I identified myself as a jazz drummer. And just to put some, time frame around it, I started playing in 1963. And before anyone in the U.S. ever heard of the Beatles, which is significant in that the music landscape was really different before the Beatles and after the Beatles, and how it influenced the people of my generation. And then when the Beatles came, it really changed how young people related to music. So before that, there was a lot more access and interest in big band jazz and jazz in general. And you could see it on TV, and you could see it on, Steve Allen and Johnny Carson and all these different shows. So I identified myself more as a jazz drummer. But coming up in the 60s, so I went to high school from 68 to 72. Also, then, when I heard Mitch Mitchell and Ginger Baker and John Bonham and Ian Pace, and I could relate to that quite easily.
Yeah.
And also, one of my favorite jazz drummers, of course, was Buddy Rich. But Buddy Rich, if you really look back, he's one of the first jazz rock drummers himself. Like by 67, 68, he was playing rock tunes with his big band and playing really great rock drums. You could say fusion, but in a way it was more like he was playing rock. So when I heard Mitch Mitchell, it sounded to me a lot like Buddy Rich.
Yeah.
Because I had heard like the Mercy Mercy album, and then Buddy and Soul, where he played like the whole record was just like pop tunes. So even though I had an idea that I was a jazz drummer, I was just wide open to be able to play anything. And as a young person of that generation, we played everything. And it was not, the categories were the line, let's say, between jazz and rock, and there really wasn't much of a boundary.
Right.
I didn't even think about it. So even though during high school I was playing in big bands, I was also playing in garage bands and playing any kind of gig that came my way. So I would say my direction was follow the opportunities. Whatever presented itself, I'd be open for. So I did primarily think I'd be playing jazz, and of course my first gig right out of Berklee College of Music in 1976 was Jean Luc-Ponty, like fusion. And fusion was new then. Fusion was, it had really, if you again go back, 1971 to 73 was the original Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Yep.
And then 73 is the second incarnation of Chick Corea Return to Forever with Lenny White and Stanley Clarke, and then Al Di Meola. So that kind of music was just in its creation. It was just starting to happen. And so all of that music was influential to me, and I'd say the drummers of my generation. And we got to see them. I lived in Boston at that time and could go to the Paul's Mall and Jazz Workshop and see Tony Williams' New Lifetime with Allan Holdsworth, or Billy Cobham's Crosswinds group with Mike and Randy Brecker and John Abercrombie on guitar. And so, not that we were all playing like that. It was just that was going on in my life as a student and young musician. I'd say I was playing more in the tradition and style of Miles Davis of the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
That was what students and a lot of the ensembles, and then gigs around Boston. I was playing pop gigs, like straight ahead pop gigs, but also jazz gigs that were more like Coltrane inspired, like Elvin inspired, or Miles Davis, Tony Williams inspired. So a little bit of everything was going on in those years.
That must have been so exciting to be coming out of college, or even while you're there, to have Mahavishnu and Billy Cobham and Chick Corea, Return to Forever, and all, and to have Ginger Baker and Cream, and to have like all these incredible, Mitch Mitchell. Like what an incredible moment in music, and the boundaries pushing. Like rock and roll comes up, and then this progressive fusion emerges, and you're a young person that loves Buddy Rich, so you want that exciting music, and you're getting fed this exciting music. It's amazing.
It was a pretty great time to come up, and I think as a result, like it, I was very open-minded and willing to try anything that came my way. And I noticed John Robinson was on recently. So he was a classmate of mine, Vinnie Colaiuta, Casey Sherrill. I was in a group with Neil Steubenhaus, the LA session bass player. We had a pop band that we used to play gigs around Boston. And, so that was one end. And then I was also playing with George Garzone.
That is crazy.
Fringe, on another end, like very much free jazz. So there was a lot going on in Boston in those years, 72 to 76. So finally I got this audition with Jean Luc-Ponty, and I was recommended by Jeff Berlin, a great bass player that I was playing with a lot there. And so I went to New York to audition. There was a bunch of drummers there, but I ended up getting the gig. And, I got the gig, I think, because I could play his music. It just seemed kind of natural. I could play in odd time signatures. I could read music, and he had these long charts that he put in front of me. And so I sight read his music, played duets with him in odd times. And so that was it was a good reason to leave Berkeley and to go on tour. So I joined his group and worked with him from late 76 all through 77, made my first album, Enigmatic Ocean, with him.
Love that album.
Daryl Sturmer and Allan Holdsworth on guitars, and Ralph Armstrong
Unbelievable, straight out of college.
Yeah, it was, I was just, hanging on. And then after that, and Alan Zavad, great keyboard player in that group. So after that, I moved to LA in January 1978 and started doing auditions for whatever came my way. Now, I was roommates with the road manager from Jean Luc-Ponty, who also worked with Freddie Hubbard. So he got me an audition with Freddie Hubbard. And then I also, through the grapevine, heard that Ronnie Montrose was looking for a drummer in San Francisco to play fusion. So I did both auditions. I auditioned with Freddie Hubbard, and he asked me to be in his band. And then I went to San Francisco and auditioned with Ronnie Montrose, which was very different. It was the closest you could say would be like a Jeff Beck kind of a gig, a rock guitarist playing instrumental music. And at that time, I had just gone from playing a small Gretsch kit with an 18-inch bass drum, like just a little drum set. And in the early part of playing with Ponty, he wanted me to play with a big double bass kit he called a Billy Cobham kit. So like there's a soundstage video from 1976 that was my second gig with Ponty that you can see with this little Gretsch kit. And so if you know, it was called Fiddlers 3, and we played like about 20 minutes on this PBS soundstage. And then in January 77, I bought my first double bass SONOR kit. So that was super fun. I had never played a big double bass kit.
And you were already playing SONOR back then.
It started with Jean Luc when I got my first kit with two 24-inch bass drums. So he wanted that sound and the look of the Billy Cobham big fusion kit. And that was a kind of a game changer for me. It was really, I went from playing a little kit to a big kit. It was super fun. And so one of the main reasons why I didn't want to tour with Freddie Hubbard is because I didn't want to go back to playing the little drum set. You know, in of course, retrospect, that would have been an awesome gig.
For
but,
sure.
you know, I had to decide. And so I decided to play with Ronnie Montrose because I could keep rocking out.
Yes.
And playing the big drum set. And also I had never worked professionally with like world-class rockers. You know, all of the people I had played with were mainly jazz people.
For sure.
And so that seemed interesting. And, you know, again, it was an opportunity. I followed it. It seemed very interesting. So our tour that happened in the early part of 78 was in fact opening for Journey.
Wow. That was the first tour you did with Ronnie?
Yeah, it was Steve Perry's first tour with Journey. Whoa. And it was Journey's first tour as a headline band because they'd been together 5 years.
Right.
Ainsley Dunbar was the drummer. Steve Perry had just joined. They had just made the album called Infinity.
Yep.
And they were playing like 2,500 seat theaters, which actually was about the same size venues I was playing with Jean Luc-Ponty. So that's how popular fusion was then.
Yes.
And Journey was just up and coming. And the opening, it was the 3 acts that were on tour for like 3 or 4 months. It was Van Halen's first tour. So they opened, they were the opening act. And then Ronnie Montrose played second. And then Journey was the headliner.
What?
So that was, early. There's some pictures of that. And there's a few videos of, I know there's a video of me playing with Ronnie Montrose that's on Wolfgang's Vault. You know,
that's awesome.
Bill Graham's website. Because Bill Graham was Ronnie Montrose's manager.
Oh, yeah. So this is 78, right? So this is Van Halen 1 had just come out.
They had just released, like, their single was You Really Got Me, the Kinks.
Oh, my God.
So, you know, that was like kind of an initiation into rock and roll for me. So I watched both bands play every night. I watched Van Halen. I watched Journey. I played in the middle act. And Ronnie wanted me to just go for it. It was like total like rock fusion.
And you had Alex Van Halen opening with 2 kick drums also, right? So there's a 2 kick drum power drummer. Now you come in 2 kick drum power, go even harder, go crazy.
And Ainsley Dunbar was playing a big double bass Ludwig kit and playing great. So
I was born at the wrong time, Steve.
Yeah. So at the end of that tour, I really got along well with the guys in Journey. We all hung out. I got along well with the guys from Van Halen. Like, we had a lot of fun too. But towards the end of that year, I got a call from Herbie Herbert, the manager of Journey, asking me if I wanted to move to the San Francisco Bay Area and be in the group. And it just seemed like a very interesting musical proposition.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't done really any professional, pro level work with a great singer. I was playing with mainly instrumentalists, and Steve Perry certainly is one of the great singers.
Absolutely.
I thought everybody in the group was really great. You know, in that genre, I thought, these guys are fantastic musicians. So it seemed musically very interesting. So that's, the story of how I ended up moving to the San Francisco Bay Area and joining the band. There was no like audition period. I think, that tour was the audition period. They just
of course
knew they had an idea that it would work out, and it did work out.
They're seeing you play every night. They're seeing what your personality is like backstage, what the hang is like.
Right.
That's crazy. So Steve Perry has just gone in the band. So Journey's now, they're hitting a stride. They're playing, theaters. So you get a call from the manager asked to join Journey. Did you ever find out, like, was there someone in Journey that was like, I want Steve. Steve should be in the band?
Yeah, it was a combination of Steve Perry and Neil Schon.
Nice.
Yeah, it was, and in retrospect, we've talked about it all, and Steve Perry liked my feel, so he Journey's a rock band, so the drummer has to have a rock feel. But for Steve Perry, he's like more of an R&B singer than a rock singer. So he wanted this kind of R&B fun foundation to the rock groove, and somehow he heard that I could do that. That I could give him that sort of R&B rock feel, and Neil Schon was more interested in like rocking and infusion and stretching out and improvising. Wow. And I could do that too, so somehow I fit the bill for what they were both looking for.
That's so crazy that you're in your early 20s, right? At this point?
Yeah, 23.
You're 23 years old.
When I my birthday's in August, so I think I turned 24, and then I moved to San Francisco in September 1978.
So by the time from Berkeley until you're 24, you're already friends with and worked with Jean Luc-Ponty, Allan Holdsworth. You've toured with Journey and Van Halen. Like, you already have this rich experience, like that's incredible. You've already moved twice.
Right, from Boston to LA and then LA to San Francisco.
Yeah.
I only lived in LA for like about 8 months. That was it. And I was almost never there because I was always on the road. So.
Wow, that's amazing. One quick Van Halen question. Do you remember what they were like on that tour? Because I remember hearing that Van Halen's first big tour was opening for Journey, but I didn't realize that Journey was doing 2,500. I always just think of Journey as doing like arenas, right? So what was Van Halen like in those young days?
They were pretty wild. It was their first tour. They were, I think, very excited to be out on tour and just having a good time.
I can only imagine that good time. Yeah. Any fun backstage stories from that tour?
I can't really get into any of that, but it was fun. I will say that we all had a good time. There was some nice camaraderie. I enjoyed hanging out with Alex, and great guy, and we had fun. And the other part was I got to be good friends with Ainsley Dunbar, and we could relate a lot because I think we had somewhat similar backgrounds because he's from London and older than me. He came from an earlier generation, but he's like jazz oriented, so played traditional grip most of the time, like, swings, played with a lot of triplets. So sometimes we would warm up backstage together and just kind of hang out. And that was fun.
Calling on musicians, producers, songwriters, engineers, artists. Are you hip to JamCard? JamCard is the largest community of vetted professionals in music. The JamCard app was called LinkedIn for the music industry by Forbes. So with the JamCard app, you can create an account, say everything about you, who you've worked with in the studio, live, your skills, the gear that you play, whatever you want to show who you are. You can then search for the exact collaborator that you are looking for. You can say, I need a drummer in Los Angeles that plays hip hop that's female, or I need a songwriter in New York that uses Ableton. Whatever it may be, this is the only place where you can search like that, is the JamCard app. Plus, in the JamCard app, there's also tons of opportunities. Every single day, people are getting hired on JamCard. In the community is also where you'll find out about our event, the Jam Jam, which everyone always wants to go to. So if you want to go to the Jam Jam, you got to get in the JamCard community to find out about it. So if you're making your living in music already, or you are exceptionally talented and you're ready for the next step, make sure to go to jamcard.com and you can apply to join for free. And if you get accepted into the network, it is free. We do not charge for a membership. So make sure to go jamcard.com and join the best community of music professionals on the planet. All right, so you joined Journey. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but your first big hit with Journey was Any Way You Want It?
No, the album before that was Evolution, and it had Love and Touch and Squeeze.
Wow.
So the first record that I did was Evolution.
Yes.
And so that was the hit single, off of Evolution. And the next album was called Departure, and that had Any Way You Want It.
So these songs come out, now you're in a band that has like huge singles. How did that change your life?
Well, first of all, it took a long time to start making money.
Okay.
Because the band had, like I said, had been together 5 years, and they made 3 albums as a quartet before Steve Perry joined the band.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to recoup all the money, from those 3 albums.
Interesting.
Plus they had gotten tour support. And so I believe when I started playing in the band, I inherited, 1/6 of $1 million debt to Columbia Records. I became a band member.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think, I went from being paid like $400 a week to, with Ronnie Montrose, to $350 a week with Journey, because they had like money would go into a fund so we could each get a weekly salary.
Yeah.
But we had to pay back that debt to Columbia because that's the way the record business worked.
Of course.
And we definitely had some hit singles, but the focus really was writing albums.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then picking singles off the album.
Mm-hmm.
So when we got together to write, we were concerned with writing 10 or songs or 12 songs that told a story that made an album. But to try to answer your question, like over the years, we did eventually, pay off that debt, started making money with royalties, and started making money with touring as well, and merchandising and all that. So, I went from renting a small apartment in Mill Valley to, buying a modest home, just, which in Lagunitas, California. And then eventually, a couple of years later, buying a very nice home in northern Marin, like in Novato. And then I was able to build a recording studio and in my home. So by 1984, 85, I had a really beautiful recording studio, and I was able to make quite a few albums there. So it gave, I'd say in a lot of ways, there was a kind of year-round work with Journey to make albums and to tour. But also, I was still very interested in playing with great jazz musicians.
Yes.
And so one of the first things I did when I moved to the Bay Area is I met up with Joaquin Lievino, who was a guitarist that used to play with Ponty, and he introduced me to Randy Jackson. And at that time, Randy was, not known like he is now, but he was a great fusion bass player that was playing with NARADA Michael Walden's rhythm section.
Incredible.
And making hits with NARADA as part of his rhythm section. But Randy was also playing, he had played with Billy Cobham, he had played with Jean Luc-Ponty. And then he and I got together with Tom Coster, and we had a band and made a couple records for Fantasy, Fantasy Records, as the Tom Coster band. We played a few gigs around. And then I had Vital Information. I started Vital Information. It was already like happening because a lot of friends of mine from where I grew up in the Boston area, we'd played together every year. But by 83, I was able to get a record contract with Columbia, and so in 1983 is the first Vital Information record, and the first Vital Information tour, which I did after the Frontiers tour ended. So it was like super busy. I was super busy, just very driven. I had a lot of energy and just was working year round. So any free time.
Any free time you had from Journey, you were doing your own projects.
That's right. Yeah.
I love that. They're just going hard. And it's funny because, I mean, how were people looking at you? Because now that you're in Journey and you guys got big, you have these big singles, like you're famous now, right? Like you're in a famous band but you still have this like passion for jazz and everything that you want to be playing outside of Journey. So is everyone kind of like, how did you feel?
Yeah, it was a challenge for me, because I did become very well known as the drummer for Journey, but I didn't want to be pigeonholed as like a rock drummer that just played the music of Journey.
Yeah.
And I say that because there was other bands that were, let's say, in the category of Journey that all had good drummers, but most of them I don't think would be able to play the spectrum of music that I could play. So I did have this sense, if I'm going to have my own career as an individual, I have to establish that I'm more than the drummer from Journey.
Yes.
And capable of playing more than the music of Journey. You know, so I really was in some ways on a mission to establish that I had a bigger scope. And when it really took off is I left Journey in 1985. And then by 1986, I took Peter Erskine's place in the group called Steps Ahead, with Michael Brecker on saxophone, Mike Stern on guitar, Mike Maneri on vibes, and Daryl Jones on bass. And we toured around the world and made what now like is sort of stood the test of time, a Live in Tokyo DVD, Steps Ahead Live in Tokyo 1986. And the other factor that came in is DCI. So Paul Siegel and Rob Wallace wanted me to make educational videos. So the combination of making educational videos and then we included some Steps Ahead footage in that. And I talked about like some of my approaches to playing that music as well as Journey music. I think people could see that I had a very wide range. And that's when I won those, like you mentioned, the 5 years in a row of #1 all-around drummer.
Yeah.
And so that really did, I made a transition, let's say, at that point for people that were drum fans that were paying attention and reading Modern Drummer, and not the world in general.
Yes, not the rock star life.
A lifetime to be able to play jazz festivals and jazz clubs around the world, which now I do. It's been over 40 years that I've had Vital Information, so I'm definitely accepted in that world and have toured with a lot of other people like Mike Stern and Hiromi and continuing with Steps Ahead and lots of different things. So
the best players in the world.
Yes, that's happened, but it took a lot of work, and the main idea was, in order to be taken seriously as myself, like as an artist myself, I just wanted to establish that the scope of my abilities.
And I want to get to the post Journey stuff, but even just to stick in Journey for a minute, like your drums were so non-conventional anyways. Like the drums on Don't Stop Believin' are one of a kind. It's not this like straight ahead. Yeah, you're playing like 4 on the floor on the kick, but it's so melodically moving around the toms and the ride cymbal and everything. Like, can you walk me through the creative process in writing those drum parts for Don't Stop Believin'?
Because the music of Journey required, I'd say, a pretty disciplined drumming approach, and I'm meaning like playing with jazz rock. The approach of drumming is quite different, where it's like there's a lot of freedom to improvise and to interact with the other musicians, but for the music of Journey, that there was a little of that, but not so much of that. So what I what I focused on was being creative, but I changed my creativity from being like filling up a lot of space to trying to come up with the most interesting drum parts that I could. And sometimes the best part was just very straight ahead, but other times, like I had some room to do things that I felt were unusual and creative. And, you know, I'm not the only drummer to do that. I mean, one of the greatest examples is Ringo.
Yeah.
You know, like he's got so many incredible drum parts on the Beatles music. And so that concept was an inspiration to like how do we be creative in this situation and express my musicianship.
Yeah.
And so with Don't Stop Believin', we wrote in a rehearsal room. We rehearsed in Oakland we rented a rehearsal space, and just 5 days a week we'd go and hash out ideas, just grooves and, you know, bass lines, guitar riffs, keyboard chord progressions, vocal melodies, and those eventually got turned into songs. And I would always start someplace pretty simple, and just like you're saying with Don't Stop Believin', the 4 on the floor bass drum and a basic backbeat was probably where I started. Mm-hmm. But then I was starting to just hear some, like, and to me, counter melodies, you know, like some counterpoint and counter melodies. And so I worked out all those parts at home, because there wasn't so much space to do it in the rehearsal studios, because there it was like, let's work on the form, let's work on making a chorus, let's have melodies for a verse, melodies for a chorus. And I, you know, to a degree I could experiment with drumming, but most of the time if it got too far out, then the heads turn and like, what are you doing over there? Hey, we're trying to write hit songs for you, you know, or, you know, we just need a groove. So I do a lot of that work at home and then bring it into the rehearsal. And basically, if nobody responded, that was a good thing.
Yes.
If it didn't jar anyone and no heads turned, it just then sort of became part of the song. So there's really nothing more I can tell you other than I started to hear these melodies on the toms and then bell of the cymbal. And then in order to do that, I had to teach myself how to play open-handed for that song, which I was not an open-handed player, but I figured it out for that one particular tune. And I have to, you know, and to give credit to Terry Bozzio, he was playing some very interesting drums at that time with different groups that he was in. He was in a group called UK, where he played some pretty cool parts that I thought that inspired me. He was also in a not a very well-known group called Group 87. It was a really an incredible band with Mark Isham on keyboards and
I'm going to check that out.
And trumpet, yeah, and there was a really interesting band, and Terry played some very cool drums. So I was listening to that, and that did give me some inspiration to play different, say, melodic kind of drum parts, and so it all worked out. And then I say the final step of that is that the producers liked it. So once we go from the rehearsal room, and like we would write a whole album of material, rehearse it a lot, so we could go in the studio and just do a few takes, and then that would be it. Like we didn't work in the studio in a way like some bands just like spent months. Like we'd spend weeks, just a couple weeks getting all the songs done, and then there would be some weeks of overdubs, you know.
Wow.
But the tracks were played live. Steve Perry sang live.
Wow.
Neil played his solos live, and we kept a lot of that. It was mostly live performance. And the other thing, there were no click tracks.
Right.
You know, we just played as a band. We just played the music. And the producers liked those parts. And accentuated them. Like they were, you can really hear them in the mix.
Absolutely.
You know, and to give credit to the engineers for recognizing like that, it was a cool part of the song. So
the
guess
toms
that's
and the ride cymbal you were thinking of as counter melodies.
Yeah.
And the producers loved it. It became such a huge part of the song. And it's you know, you mentioned Ringo and these other drummers, or even Ian Pace, these other drummers, that there's a lot of drums in these songs that are on the radio, but they always go back to like something more straight ahead, something driving straight. There's never a straight ahead driving point, right? In Don't Stop Believin', and the whole time it's this like dance of a melodic performance. Well, and it's a huge hit on the radio. It's like, it's got to be the only time. I can't think of another one that stays the whole time like that.
Right. Maybe not. I'd have to really think that through. I don't know.
Which is why you're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Steve Smith. Wow, man, that's so cool. And then on top of that, Journey now is huge, and you have multiple hits, right? Like songs keep coming out. You're on all the biggest Journey songs. Like that moment of Journey with you and Steve Perry, of course, that's the journey, right? Like, did you find it like, is that just like the universe timing that you get in right after Steve, and then you guys write all of your biggest songs? Like, does that just blow your mind ever?
I was in the right place at the right time. Very fortunate. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And very grateful for that.
Wow. That's so cool. So was there times in these songs when they would look back and be like, dude, what are you doing? That's way too much.
Yes.
Double kick.
So, yeah, you just find the line. I would find that line where it would be, and then sometimes that works, and sometimes to play a little over the top is just what the song needs. Like,
for sure.
I mean, there's I could tell you a couple of songs if you haven't listened to. Like, for instance, there's a song on Departure that's called, I think it's called I'm Crying. And this is with Greg Raleigh on Hammond B3. Now that tune it's a really interesting piece of music it's all performance. It's like you can hear that we're in the studio, and it's not like a pop song, but it's a rock tune that really was a great part of that album. But some great performances in there from everybody, and very loose drumming, very kind of free drumming. And then on the Escape album, Mother Father really required like kind of over the top playing to make that tune work. So that there was a nice balance in that group for me, to go from like Open Arms to Mother Father, and then like on the next album, Frontiers, like Faithfully. And then there's the tune Frontiers, the actual the title track has some very sideways drumming on that. I don't know if you've listened to that piece of
I'm going to go back and revisit all of these.
Yeah, but that's in a lot of people, when they hear it, they don't even know where one is. And in a way, that was part of what we were going for. We were really trying to push our musicianship, and let's play something that people can relate to, but it's still a bit of a challenge to hear it.
Absolutely.
And to
it's such a relationship, like almost like a married couple thing, where you're just like seeing how far you can push. How far can I push these boundaries? When do I cross the line? Okay, I'll take it back a little bit.
Right. And because we felt like that made us different from a band that was like very, very pop.
Yes.
Rock. We consciously wanted to be successful, but we wanted to have some musicianship
so
vibe
much,
and people, and that people would appreciate.
You did it, man. Right place, right time. Perfect gig for Steve Smith. I love it, dude. Like in watching videos of you, I've watched a few of your drum solos from the early 80s with Journey, and you just look like you're having the greatest time, man. The crowd's loving it. Your solos are so... Do you write your solos?
No,
you
I
don't
write my solo. And that's kind of an overused word, like writing drum parts, but
I mean, like,
I think people, I come up with a drum part, but I don't actually write it down. You know what I
right.
mean?
Okay. But I mean, like, is there a
but I came up-
structure to your
Yeah.
solos when you were doing that? Because it seems like because it's so perfectly executed while still feeling in the moment.
Yes. So I'd have a structure in mind.
Yeah.
Definitely. I had a form in mind. And then in with that form, I'd improvise.
Yeah.
So it wasn't worked out. It wasn't the same every night. But, during the early years, I soloed on a tune called La Du Day. That was a shuffle. And so that had a theme like this sort of tom. So I had a theme. And so it gave me a theme to work with. Then I'd improvise, come back to the theme. And then with the Escape tour, I wanted to change it up. So I did a solo on a different tune, but I don't remember exactly what it was right now. But anyway, I did have something in mind.
Wow.
And then just to give myself some kind of structure to work with.
And your speech when you were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, your speech was so good. Everyone should go back and watch it. We'll post a link in there. But how when you talk about thanking like Billy Cobham, bringing up Mahavishnu and NARADA and everyone, it's like it was such a well written speech, just like your drum solos.
Now that I did right. But yeah, I knew I was actually coached by Danny Seraphin, who was inducted the year before with Chicago, and he's a friend of mine, and so we talked before that, and he was saying, well, I kind of messed up on this, and he was giving me, but this was good, and so anyway, thanks for the pointers, so that helped me. But I did want to mention, in a way, two of my biggest influences were NARADA, Michael Walden, and Billy Cobham. And I used a lot of their inspiration for coming up with the Journey parts, as well as, hundreds of other great drummers that were influential to me. But in a way, like Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the idea is that people get inducted that are inspirational and that have influenced generations of people. To me, the Mahavishnu Orchestra should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Absolutely.
Because Billy Cobham has influenced so many drummers, from Alex Van Halen and Hut for Teacher was like right out of Billy Cobham's first solo album. Oh yeah. Spectrum with the beat he played on Quadrant 4.
Absolutely.
And John McLaughlin has influenced just hundreds of guitar players. And then Jan Hammer, played with Jeff Beck, and his influence has been huge. And then you had Rick Laird and Jerry Goodman, also amazing musicians. And if any band should be inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for their influence, to me, it's the original Mahavishnu Orchestra, because they were so off the hook.
Let's make that happen. How do we do it? I think the only person I could try to politic would be Jimmy Jam. Try to get it through Jimmy Jam.
Go for it. Do it.
I'm gonna do it, man. It's so good. It seemed like you guys were having such a great time, and it seemed like there was great camaraderie between you guys. And so, what happened? How did you end up leaving Journey?
Oh man. So you had to bring that up, huh?
Well, I think it's important. I'd love to talk about how do you handle chapters ending in your life and moving on to the next?
Well, I don't want to get into a great detail, but one of the big changes that happened between writing the music for Frontiers and then writing the music for Raised on Radio is that Steve Perry, NEAL, and Sean and Jonathan Cain, they wanted to write music by them without Ross, Valerie, and I. Yeah. So and there was the advent of the technology to be able to do that. So they had, drum machines were just starting to come out. Sequencers were coming out, and they got together and wrote the music for that album without Ross and I. Now that was a big change of concept within the group. Steve Perry had his solo album out that was a pretty big hit. He sold over 2 million albums with Street Talk. So he had a lot of influence over the direction of the music. And by the time Ross and I were presented the music, it was kind of finished. And it was like, okay, you guys come in and we're going to make an album. Now, at that time, I really had no experience playing with clicks, no experience playing with quantized tracks. And that was a pretty big learning curve that I went through subsequently. But I wasn't really able to play at the level needed to make that music work on that album. And I ended up on 3 songs on that album, but Larry London and is on drums, and Randy Jackson on bass on most of the other songs, because that was a rhythm section that Steve Perry used on Street Talk. So he produced the album, wasn't happy with my performance and Ross's performance. So basically we got replaced by amazing session players. Larry London, a really great session drummers that for him, it was just another day in the studio to play with clicks, and he made that music sound great. I think his performances on Raised on Radio are fantastic. And, but I really wasn't able to pull that off at that time. So I went through a growth curve, and then we were asked to leave the band. We left the band, and because they wanted to use whoever they wanted for albums and tours. And in a way, it was the end of the group, because then subsequently they auditioned literally 40 some odd drummers before they chose Mike Beard to go on tour. But that would be a good show, like all the different drummers that auditioned for Journey during that time, and they really were not happy with anybody. So it was an interesting exercise to go through. In a way, it was kind of gratifying for me that it was so hard for them to find somebody. Yeah. They eventually did, but then I think the whole chemistry of the group was changed, and it didn't last very long after that. And then it really fell apart. And then if we jumped ahead 11 years, because by that time, I was playing with Steps Ahead. I was doing my thing and learning how to be a session player, and getting very comfortable with playing with clicks and loops and quantized tracks. It just, it was something I had to focus on. And, but then we did get back together for an album called Trial by Fire. And in that scenario, we went back to the original idea of putting the music together as a group.
Amazing.
And I love that album. I think that's one of the great Journey records, though it's not that well known. It did sell 1 million copies, which is pretty good. But it wasn't a multi-platinum album like all the other ones. But we wrote the music. We put all these pieces together in rehearsal. We rehearsed and rehearsed. We actually had a producer that made us rehearse over and over and over. And then we went in the studio and only played like 2 or 3 takes of each tune and used the click, and it was fine. It was easy at that point for me to play to a click, but it was also easier for them to play to a click.
Yes.
That was another thing. Like, they weren't that comfortable with it either in 85, but, in the music world from 85 to like 95, 96, it was now like most everyone is playing to machines and clicks. So
For
the
sure.
whole group was comfortable playing with a click.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that album happened, and that's a pretty fantastic album. But again, Steve Perry didn't want to go on tour. He ended up leaving the group, and that's when I said, I didn't want to continue playing with them, because then they were going to find a new singer, and that's when Dean Castronovo came in, and I just kept going full on with my own career, which felt like that's exactly what I wanted to do.
How much time was there when you got asked to leave Journey? How much time was there for you to build essentially your new career with doing your education and Steps Ahead and all these other things? Like, and how did you feel in that moment? Because your life with Journey is moving, right? You guys, you have incredible success. You're riding a wave. This is all great. Now all of a sudden things change, and you're asked to leave Journey. How does that feel, and how much time did it take you to essentially get on your feet and have your this new career? You're still drumming and you're still Steve Smith and everything, but this new direction. Like, was that a month, a week, a year? Like, and what was that like? That must have been a hard time. It
was a hard transition, because I was invested as being a band member.
Yeah.
I wasn't a sideman. I was an equal member. So
it's like a divorce.
I took it. Yeah, it was like a divorce. And then there was, a lot of legal work to officially separate.
Yeah.
But interestingly, I still was part of the Journey Corporation. So, even though Ross and I left the group as touring members, we retained our ownership of the trademark Journey and Nightmare Inc. and so our royalties were all continuing to happen. So it was more working through the legalities of not being a part of the touring aspect of the group. But it was hard. I did go to therapy to really work out a lot of those feelings of, how hard it was to be in the group at that time, and how hard it was to leave. But for me, the music is so important. That's like that part. So my identity and my direction, it's not completely, it wasn't connected to being the Journey drummer, being in Journey. It was definitely part of who I was during that time, but it wasn't the entirety of it. And I had, like I was saying, all these other musical environments and bands that I was playing in. And that saved me in a way, like emotionally, like I could go out and play with local jazz guys from San Francisco, or go on tour with, eventually with Steps Ahead. And really my first step was going out and doing clinics. I had been asked to do clinics most of the whole time I was with Journey, but I didn't have time to do any clinics. And so the first thing that I did was let SONOR and Zildjian know that I was available for clinics. So I ended up doing a lot of clinics in like late 85 and then 86, which is in fact, what led me to be playing drums with Steps Ahead.
Wow.
Because I was doing a clinic outside of Philadelphia with Peter Erskine and Lenny White.
Nice.
And Kenwood Denard was there, and Jerry Brown. I remember it was quite a lineup. But backstage I was talking with Peter and Lenny, and Peter was saying he had just left Steps Ahead because he was going to be going back with Joe Zawinul with a group called Weather Update. And then and Lenny said, yeah, they called me to see if I wanted to do it, but I'm too busy producing. And I said, well, I need a gig.
Yeah, I'll take it.
And so Lenny said, all right, I'll call those guys tomorrow. And sure enough, Lenny White called Mike Brecker and Mike Maneri, and I got a call from both of them the next day.
Nice.
To come to New York and start playing with the group. So, that was it was a difficult transitionary year, but I wasn't going to let it stop me.
Yeah.
Or derail me from my idea of what I wanted to be as a musician.
Absolutely. And then, you went on and did what you have been known for years and years and years now. Like, it's really incredible. I mean, you've become like an award-winning educator, and now you have all your Vital Information and your other Steve Smith ensembles. It's cool. Like, I wonder what would happen. I mean, you were already trying to do that, or you were doing that in your free time while in Journey, but imagine if Journey had just kept going. It's like allowed you to do this new chapter.
That's a very good point. Yeah, it really pushed me out there, and I have like a perspective that bands have sort of a creative arc, and beginning, middle, and end, and and it's really natural for that creative period to, like, in Journeys is a good example of it. I mean, right now, like the main body of work that Journey created was during that time, let's say 77 to 85. And even now, like, that's the music that the band plays, even though they've continued to make albums.
Yeah.
The music that stands the test of time was during that one period. And so a lot of bands, have that creative arc, and it's totally natural for it to have a beginning, middle, and end. And really one of the greatest examples is the Beatles.
Yeah.
They didn't keep going and going. They went until they were done.
Yeah.
And then the individual musicians went out and did what they do. And I feel like that is the next step. If you're an evolving musician, you have this experience in a group. And I learned a lot in that. It was like a finishing school. It was like getting a PhD in the music business.
Yeah.
But then afterwards, I wanted to continue on and focus on doing my own thing. And that it feels like a real healthy way to be in life and in music.
Absolutely. Well, so so to move on to the next chapters, right? So one thing I wanted to ask you about, I'm a big Buddy Rich fan too, and I know that Neil Peart asked you, right? I believe he invited you to play on the Buddy Rich tribute album, and you got to play Nutville, which is like so fun. Like how much fun was that?
That was a lot of fun.
It must have been the most powerful feeling.
Yeah. I think even before that, I had played some gigs with the Buddy Rich Big Band.
Oh, nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah, if you go back to those, original videos that now you can see, there was like the original. I think Buddy died in 1987. It'd have to be fact checked, but I think that's what it was. And shortly after that, there was gigs like with Greg Bissonette and Steve Gadd and Louis Bellson and Vinnie Colaiuta and Dennis Chambers playing with the Buddy Rich Big Band. And then there were other scenarios where I played with the big band. And then there was a concert in New York, like that you can see. I played some tunes with the big band. Neal Peart played some tunes. Will Calhoun played, Marvin Smitty Smith, Omar Hakim. Like, we all played with the big band. And I think it was from that concert that Neal got the idea to do that album. Mm-hmm. And he invited me and a lot of other drummers to play. And interesting, maybe a lot of people don't know this, but he and I had played together before on Jeff Berlin's first solo record.
Did not know that.
So in 1984 I think it was. Jeff Berlin made a record called Champion, and Ronnie Montrose produced it. And I played drums on almost the whole album, all but like one song. And Neil played drums on one song, and then we played together on one song, double drums. So that's
what song?
One song's called, I think it's called Marabi. It was a Cannonball Adderley tune that we both played on. So it's, Jeff Berlin Champion. So, we met then. I hadn't really listened to him. He hadn't really listened to me, but we just met in the studio and had a really good time hanging out and playing. And when we then did, he invited me to play, and I think it was 93 on Burnin' for Buddy. Mm-hmm. And I played Nutville. I did 3 songs. 2 of them have come out, and the third one is yet to ever come out. I did Moment's Notice also. That was on volume 2.
On volume 2. Yeah, that's the opening track, right?
Is it? All right, cool.
Yeah, it's the opening track.
But that's when Neil said, "Hey, what happened to you? How come your chops are so much better now than they were in 1985?" And that's when I told him, I've been studying with Freddie Gruber.
Wow.
And he was like, really? I want to meet him. And so then I invited Freddie to come. And that's when Neil met Freddie Gruber, and which of course then went into him taking lessons from Freddie also.
So great. All the Rush fans, thank you.
I hope so.
What was your friendship like with Neil Peart? That must have been cool.
It was like mutual respect.
Yeah.
And we wrote emails, occasionally, and would correspond. And then I would go to see Rush. My son was a big Rush fan, Ian.
Nice.
And so Neil got us tickets, right up in the front row. And so we just had a good connection. And he sent me one of his books that he wrote, about touring. And so, we had a nice connection of mutual respect. And yeah, that was sad when he passed so early. Very
Absolutely.
sad. Yeah.
How I know his thoughts on touring, but how do you feel on touring?
How do I feel about touring?
Yeah, do you love it? How do you feel now? You've been doing it for decades.
Yeah. Well, there's really like different worlds.
Yeah.
Touring happens and so when I tour with my own group, it's very basic. Like, when I tour on the East Coast, we rent a van, 15-passenger van, take out a couple of the back seats, and we put our gear in the back and we drive from venue to venue. And so that hasn't changed in literally 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah, because to make it work, there's not a lot of money in it, and we're doing it because we want to play the music, and and make some money. We don't want to lose money, but it is what it is, and that's the only way to make that happen. And then, like recently, I did a tour. This is spring of 2025, a West Coast tour. And it was pretty spread out. So we did fly, of course, commercial airline from city to city, which was a lot because, we're all United flyers. So we had to go through Denver or through San Francisco to wherever we wanted to go on the West Coast. And then I had SONOR, KHS America, which is the U.S. SONOR distributor. They were able to get me a different SONOR kit for every gig.
Nice.
So it's a grind. So I go to the gig 90 minutes before the sound check to set up and tune a new drum set.
Yep.
And it's rewarding, but it's a lot of work.
Shows how much you care.
Yeah, I'm into, I'm into it. And then on the other hand, I did tour with Journey from 2016 to 2020. Now that's a whole nother, that's very easy to tour. Like the band leases a private jet. We hubbed and stayed in really nice hotels and
Four Seasons.
And so that,
yeah.
that was 6 months of every year. And so that was like pretty fun and pretty interesting. And my wife, Diane, came along.
Nice.
Because, it was comfortable. And
absolutely.
And I, it was an interesting experience to play the music in my 60s.
Yeah.
And see what that was like. But it was fine. It was like no problem for me to play it. I just played, got a big sound and didn't play hard, didn't hurt myself at all. I just, stayed very controlled and relaxed. So that part of it worked out. So anyway, I know what it is, what touring is like, whether it's touring.
You've seen it all.
Yeah, from one end of the spectrum to the other. So
does that make it harder? I feel like
I could do the Journey tours in recent tours, but also knowing and just give the music exactly what it needed. I wasn't trying to make the gig more than it is.
Yeah.
So I could just play the music the way I feel like it sounds best musically. And then I knew I had like 6 months to do some other kind of music that I could stretch out and play a lot more, free and occupy a different musical zone.
You must be very disciplined and very understanding and care so much, because to go from the very spoiled traveling that you've had, right, to go to the more grind of traveling and still be doing it, it shows how much you care. Like I know I struggle with that. I've been spoiled, and now I don't want to do anything besides that, and that's a problem, because it gets expensive when it's not somebody else paying on a different project and it's one of my projects. Like, how do you find, I guess, like peace, or understand, like, I guess, what needs to be done in order to do it and just be like okay with it?
It's because I want to play with these musicians.
Yeah.
I really want to play with the guys that are in my group now, Yannick Wisdala on bass and Manuel Valera on keyboards. I want to play with these guys and get out there and enjoy playing music at that level. And, and it's now, I'm 70 years old. It's not that easy to play at that high level physically. So it takes a lot of maintenance to, keep my chops up. And in a way, like that's one of the things that isn't talked about at music school when I was a student, is like, how do you play great every night and really live up to people's expectations night after night after night? And, it's something I learned very early on. Like I'd say I really learned it while touring with Jean Luc-Ponty, because as a young student, I'm trying all kinds of different things, and I wasn't thinking about consistency. I wasn't thinking, how do I play great every night? It's just, how do I have fun playing this music? But once you're in that kind of professional situation of, people paying a lot of money to come see you play and having high expectations, like, there's that pressure to really perform. And so there's a certain discipline that has to happen in the maintenance of your chops when you're not on tour, and then how you structure your day when you are on tour, so you are healthy and feeling as good as you can feel when you go on stage at night. So those are like lessons that can only be learned by doing, and just in that moment. And so it's more important to me to get out and play with great musicians than it is to have a comfortable touring experience.
So clearly the drumming still turns you on still.
It does. Yeah.
I love that.
The drumming and the musical environment.
Did you ever lose that in your life?
No,
Amazing.
no, never.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, never lost it. But I will say now that I don't need to do it as much.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I'm satisfied with a few tours a year with my band.
Yeah.
And then playing like in some clubs in New York. That's enough. I don't have to do it all the time. And so that feels good. Like
yes.
I'll take a lot of time off in the summer and take off like winters, you know, like December, January, February, and just take time off and be home. And that feels really good.
Oh, I love that. I was going to say, you're at your place right now in New York.
Yeah.
I've never understood, I'm born and raised in LA, so I'm a drummer that grew up in LA. There's more houses here and stuff. How does a drummer make it work in New York? You got your silent practice kit behind you.
Little kit. Right. What I do, and now I don't live here all the time, but I live here a fair amount. But I'll go to a rehearsal studio and, you know, rent like some time. I go to this place called Euphoria, and I just go and practice for 3 hours, a couple days a week, to play on real drums.
Nice.
And drummers that live here all the time, most of them have some kind of practice space outside of their apartment that they go to, like they rent a space and go there at a particular time every day or a few days a week. And then you have to have carded because they don't have a car here. So So, yeah,
it's a whole other thing.
It's a challenge.
Whenever I meet drummers in London and New York, especially ones that are coming up, you're far past that in your stage of your profession and your career. But I'm always like, how do you do it? It's a whole different thing. You gotta really want it.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I'd love to talk to you about, because you are one of the best educators ever. How do you take your wisdom and create a course?
Well, I have to say that I've had the advantage of having a lot of great instruction over the years. So I've studied with some very good teachers that are role models. And you know, if I go back to my first drum teacher named Billy Flanagan, who was a drum teacher in Brockton, Massachusetts, is where he lived, and that's like near Boston, where I grew up. He was a great teacher and never ran out of material to present to me. And then after that, I studied with Gary Chafee and then Alan Dawson, and then eventually, you know, Freddie Gruber and lots of other people that I just hang at drum camps or, you know, and say, what is that you're doing? Show me that, you know? So I was always like looking for new ideas and techniques and information. So I've had a lot of good role models. And most of the videos that I've made for first DCI and then Hudson Music were based on something I was doing for myself. Like the 2002, there was the first big budget Hudson Music DVD is my drum set technique history of the US beat. Now I was studying with Freddie, like really into learning all these techniques. And so I was teaching that in my clinics. So my clinics evolved because like they're in some ways revolve around what it is that I'm working on myself at that time. And then I was researching the history of U.S. music and U.S. drumming for my own education. And Rob Wallace saw me do that in a clinic and said, let's make a video about that. And then I was, you know, a few years later working on playing match grip and for myself, you know, to develop some more technique with match grip. And then that turned into a Hudson book and a video called Pathways of Motion. So in a way, it's like what I use to teach myself. And then if other people are interested, it goes to that next step.
That's
a
beautiful.
video or a clinic. But I know how to present things in a way of systematically, because that's the way I learned.
Yeah.
Pretty systematically, and then put in the time to practice like a lesson over the week, and then, go to the lesson. And that kind of systematic practice really works, really works. And it's a way of, if I have a gig, like whether it's, let's say I'm going on tour with Mike Stern and he says, okay, we're going to play these 10 tunes. I know how to rehearse those myself before I even get to the first gig, with this kind of systematic way of practicing.
What should I be doing, Steve? How do I systematically practice? I've definitely never been that drummer. I got to admit. I got to be honest. I feel like I'm the drummer that.
Have you ever taken weekly lessons?
Never.
Oh,
I'm a self-taught. Don't read music. Self-taught drummer.
Well, see, I'm self-taught too. So
okay, beautiful.
So that's the way. Like if I'm self-taught in how to play music, but I've had a lot of lessons on how to play the drums.
Right.
So teaching you can only teach yourself how to play music.
Yeah.
But other people can help you learn how to play the drums.
I love that. So I guess I don't know how to play drums, but I can play music quite well.
And so
I have watched
the weekly lesson thing is like, here, we're going to do this page out of syncopation, and then that page out of Wilcoxon, and then stick control, or whatever it is, Yep. So then, you practice that for the week, and then you go see your teacher, and then you play it. So you perform it. So it's like it's a systematic way of developing your drumming ability. And then that's super helpful for becoming a professional player. And one of the things that I look at, and like I brought up, how do you be so consistent, consistent night after night? And part of it is like that daily practice, or close to daily practice, with some kind of conception and direction in mind that you do, even if you don't feel like doing it.
Yes.
Because you play gigs whether or not you feel like doing it.
Absolutely.
You may not, if you play, you may not want to play 6 nights a week, but if you got 6 nights a week of gigs, you have to.
Yep.
So how do you prepare yourself for that? It's like part of it is that daily practice, that discipline. So you just push yourself to get in that space. And so my practicing now it's more about developing vocabulary that I use for improvisation. So I don't practice, like, say, rudiments and reading and things like that. It's more like I'll play and I'll find like interesting ideas that maybe material that I play, or I hear somebody else play a concept or transcribe like 2 bars of something, and then work with it and develop it over the course of weeks and months until it gets into my playing where I can access it easily in improvisation. Because that's so much about what I do now. It's not just learning drum parts and then playing those drum parts night after night. It's learning music, and then that has a lot of room for improvisation and interaction. And to keep it fresh, my vocabulary has to keep expanding, so I don't just play the same things night after night.
Absolutely. How much did learning, like working with Zakir Hussain, tabla, and I've seen you use conical a lot and everything, like how much is that opens up drumming or US drumming or whatever to a whole other level? Like how much has that pushed you forward?
I didn't study tabla. I studied conical. That's one thing. The vocal, vocal art form of using syllables to express rhythms, and
drumming.
But first it started just conical,
right?
Just the vocal part, but it's more than just it's learning specific rhythms, and it's learning a concept of how to structure rhythms that comes from India, and so that's played a pretty big that role in how I think about rhythm now. It's expanded my rhythmic awareness and vocabulary greatly. And so it comes from studying the music of South India, mostly for me. There is like two schools of rhythm: South Indian concept and North Indian concept. And my main influences at first were from South India, and for instance, like a great practitioner of the South Indian style is Selva Ganesh, who plays kanjira, and his father Viku Vinayakaram, who plays clay pot, the gattam. So I played with them a number of times, and they're clearly instructing me in how those rhythms are put together. Now Zakir understands that, but his expertise was the North Indian style. And because the tabla comes from the north, so I had a little of that. Like he showed me some of that. And then I've worked with Pete Lockett quite a bit, and Pete isn't one of the few people that really does understand both North and South. And so he's showed me a lot as well. In fact, the two of us are working on a book together that dives into the Indian rhythms. So that will be a Hudson Music book at some point in the future. So yeah, it's definitely influenced me and opened my rhythmic awareness. And it's great. It's great information, and it's not that well known in the West, and it has not been applied to the drum set very much.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a whole wide open landscape that's opportunity for people to jump into.
Absolutely. It's got to be the most advanced percussion there is, craziest rhythms there are. I can only imagine how much it's opened up your mind and then pushed you to the next level, even taking that and applying it to your drumming rhythmically.
Yeah, they have a very well thought out, very sophisticated system of dealing with rhythm.
Steve, I could talk to you for hours, man. I mean, there's so many subjects I'd love to dive in on, but we don't have time.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe we can do a 2.0 or we can hang in person next time. I would absolutely love that.
All right. Sounds good.
But thank you so much for the time. I really enjoyed getting to hang with you today, Steve.
It's been fun, Elmo. A lot of fun.
Hit me when you're in LA, okay? Please. I'm going to come see your ensemble. I want to see Vital Information. And by the way, the Vital Information's gigging right now. So go check out Vital Information in the next couple months. And you got dates in all through June, yeah?
That's right. Yeah, we're playing East Coast in June. We just got back from playing at Ronnie Scott's in London.
Love Ronnie
Earlier
Scott's.
this year, we played... we did a West Coast tour, including 3 nights at the Baked Potato.
Oh, I missed it.
Yeah.
I want to fly out for your New York dates. I'm going to see if I can make it happen.
We'll be at Birdland June 20, 21, and 22.
Legendary.
Okay.
I'm going to try to sneak in. I'll call you for the guest list.
All right. Let me know.
Thank you, Steve, man. Have a great one, bro.
All right. My pleasure.
This is the stuff, man.